Thank you, Shepard, very much. And take a look at what happened at the corner of Wall and Broad. We finished on the upside, almost 300 points on the upside. Not enough to wipe out yesterday's 469-point drubbing, but enough to at least make buyers believe all was not naught for buying. Now, there were a couple of catalysts to this today. China fell, but only a teeny bit, this time 0.5%. Normally, that market seems to give up about 5% every day. Didn't happen. We also had some surprising strength in the industrial sector here in this country. Bottom line today, financials up, interest rates down, optimism about the U.S. economy moving forward. But the fact of the matter is that China is going to be closed for the next couple of days, or at least its financial markets are. And that is providing a nervous underpinning to investors who might wait to sell in droves next week when the Chinese markets reopen, and that would be after our Labor Day holiday. Suffice it to say, very, very confusing. We're going to keep an eye on it this hour and handicap exactly what's going on and why, because these triple-digit swings have gotten to be commonplace. In fact, they've been the case in 10 of the last 11 sessions of trading. I want to thank some of my colleagues and friends, Charles Payne and Stuart Varney and Trish Regan, for ably filling in and trying to keep track of this madness. And yes, America, you're welcome. Now that I'm back, the buyers return. But enough about me. Back to this guy I've had the pleasure of knowing for the better part of, actually, a few decades now. Ted Weisberg of Seaport Securities on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. You know, Ted, as you wisely pointed out earlier today on Fox Business, this is a market that sort of has its fits and starts, but in all, has sustained rather nicely through crises. This one is standing as well. But what is going on here? Why so volatile? Why these big swings?
Well, you know, to begin with, Neil, you know, yesterday we went out of here and it looked absolutely like the end of the world, down just about 500 points. And I think most folks came in here today expecting the worst. And here we are up almost 300 points. But, you know, you need to keep this all in perspective because we're still down 2,000 points from the trading highs, which is a pretty healthy correction. I think, Neil, what the markets are probably trying to tell us, because I do believe that the markets never lie, I think the markets are trying to tell us what I think a lot of folks probably have seen by reading between the tea leaves for the last 6 months, that the world's economies, the U.S. economy aside, basically is showing flat to no growth. And we've seen that in the commodity prices and the weakness in the extreme weakness in the commodity sectors with all the stocks that are in that area and, of course, in the energy sector. And I think it's sort of just coming home to roost, and the market is going through these convulsions, this readjustment, if you will, to reflect, you know, this rather negative scenario. Now, does that mean we're not going to trade lower? You know, perhaps we are, because markets are not rational under the best of circumstances. But the market's trying to find a level, you know, where a lot of this bad news is priced in. Clearly, we're not there yet. I don't know where it is. I don't think we're looking at a 2008, 2009 scenario, but we could possibly be looking at a market that's going to trade a little lower until it gets its sea legs.
All right, now, when you say a little lower, we're about, you know, we're into that correction territory that is falling more than 10% from highs. It takes another 10% to be a bear market. Do you think we'll get there?
Well, I think, listen, Neil, I think it's possible. Let's keep in context that we were trading the Dow 6,500 in March of 2009.
Very good point.
And to the trading highs of 18,500 or 600, that was almost a triple. You know, and markets tend to be forward-looking, not trailing. And so I think the issue for the markets now is that when it looks forward, you know, it sees more problems than positive solutions in the world's economies, U.S. aside, and I think that's problematical. So does that mean we go down another 10%? I mean, who knows? I mean, your guess is as good as mine, but I would say at the moment the bias, I would think, is clearly on the negative side. Now, you don't want to be negative. You'd like to say the glass is half full, and it really is at the end of the day half full. Otherwise, we wouldn't even get up in the morning. But you know, markets are going to go where they need to go, and you know, if you look at the performance of a lot of stocks, we've seen lower lows and lower highs, which if you were looking at a chart would simply say that the market is in a downward bias. And unfortunately, nobody's going to ring a bell and tell us when we get there.
Yeah, wisely put, as you always have did, Ted. Thank you very much. You might have a future at this market thing, Ted. Keep it up.
You think?
Ted Weisberg, thank you very, very much. By the way, on to other developments, including that Iran deal. The president has it now. It looked like he secured his 34th Senate vote. In other words, an acclamation by a 34th Senator, this time Barbara Mikulski of Maryland, that she will go along with that controversial Iranian deal. A deal, by the way, that, well, Donald Trump was starting the day out saying he hates. Listen to this.
Everything we negotiate is bad, including the Iran deal. That deal is one of the worst negotiated transactions I've ever witnessed in my entire life. It's negotiated by people that are either stupid, incompetent, there's something wrong with them. It's a deal that's absolutely insane.
All right, but it's a deal, as I said, that looks like it will go through. In other words, the votes are there to at least prevent an override of a presidential veto that might not come to pass now because the votes simply aren't there. The Boston Herald columnist Adriana Cohen. Adriana, what do you make of this?
Well, first off, we know that the Iran deal is disastrous. It gives the world's leading sponsor of terror $150 billion to fund their terror proxies while throwing Israel under the bus and the 4 hostages. I mean, I cannot believe that President Obama or John Kerry would give Iran $150 billion and not get even one hostage back. Those assets that are frozen would be unfrozen. The issue becomes then, how did 34 senators get convinced that this would not and will not lead to what you just said? It's absurd. I just cannot believe it. We know that Iran is going to continue with its nuclear proliferation. What they're doing now is they're simply hitting the pause button temporarily so they can reap all the financial rewards and relieve sanctions, and then they're going to play games with us. I mean, the inspections that John Kerry accepted are incredible. The fact that these side deals say now that Iran can expect its own nuclear facilities, that's a joke, Neil.
Now, I don't want to give away something we're going to talk about later in the show, but, Senator Casey, the fine state of Pennsylvania, among those who decided to go along with the president on this Iranian deal, was telling me he has seen provisions in there that would allow for us to get tough with Iran if it decides to turn around on this and not comply to all this, including a military option. I had not heard that. Had you?
Well, you know what? Even if America, let's say, pulled back, we had these snapback agreements and we stopped funding them, it's not going to stop the other countries from giving them money. And it might reach a point very quickly that Iran has enough money that if they don't get the money from us, they're all set. They don't need it anymore. And then another problem is going to be when the embargo lifts in 5 years, they're going to be buying some very dangerous weapons from another one of our foreign enemies, Russia. And so all of this puts the world in grave danger. We know this nuclear deal is going to set off an arms race.
With these senators who decided to go with the president on this, enough to override this. But we'll watch closely. Adriana, thank you very, very much. Now, you have probably heard that and much concern about this and the fact that the president has won. And in the mainstream press, you get the idea that the president has won. The fact of the matter, though, is that despite some of these headlines you're seeing for the likes of the Washington Post and elsewhere as we rifle through these, by overwhelming majorities in both the House and the Senate, this thing is being repudiated and shot down. Just not by the 2/3 majority it would take to override a presidential veto. So I want to stress that the media is getting it wrong as far as the rejection of this thing. The United States Congress will effectively say that this thing stinks by overwhelming margins, just not a 2/3 margin. That is not a victory. It is a key deal with Iran that would be shot down by Congress, but again, not by the margin that would overrule the president. So you're going to have this odd situation of the president getting a deal that Congress doesn't want by overwhelming margins. And that is something that the Federalist Molly Hemingway finds most revealing of all. But you never know, Molly. I'll watch the press coverage on this. What do you think?
And it's not just that they're treating this as a major victory, as if he has majority support in the Senate. It's also that they're not accurately characterizing exactly what's happening with those 34 votes. It's not that those 34 people are siding with the president. They're just agreeing not to fight him. I mean, this is such a low standard for what victory would be. And it also exposes a very deep disconnect between what the American people are saying about this deal, particularly the more they get to know about it, and what you're hearing in the media. I mean, fully 80% this week reported that they were concerned about the lack of on-site, on-time inspections of facilities in Iran.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but actually I just did, right? But the White House is now saying it's going to keep working with lawmakers to build as much support as possible, but is encouraged by the latest tally of support in the U.S. Senate for this Iran deal. So they obviously say that whether it's, by a big majority or not, they have prevented Congress from torpedoing this thing. What do you make of that?
I mean, the GOP did agree to let this go forward if only 34 senators agreed not to fight it. So that was a barrier that Obama had to overcome, and he's done it. What I'm concerned about is the way the media are presenting this. I mean, when Mikulski agreed to not fight President Obama on this, someone at the Washington Post said that this was smart politics. She's literally not running for office again. I mean, if he couldn't line her up within the first day, that's ridiculous. And yet they're treating this as huge drama and a huge victory, and it just concerns me because
what explains the other 33, right? What explains this Delaware Senator Coons or Pennsylvania Senator Casey? What explains their departure from the likes of a Chuck Schumer in New York? What happened?
Well, there are legitimate differences of opinion on this Iran deal, but what's difficult is that the media are not helping mediate the discussion of whether this is a good deal for America. And there are going to be legitimate differences, but when you just focus on the horse race politics of it all, you don't get to have a discussion about the underlying politics, about whether a state sponsor of terror like Iran should get such a windfall in this deal, or whether the threat of nuclear annihilation is a big deal or not. And these are the things we don't get to talk about when we just focus on the politics.
Yeah, it is a mess, and it is apparently done, but the numbers, just sort of disguise the real rejection that this is getting. Molly Hemingway, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Well, how is Ted Cruz dealing with all of this? He's going to be telling us very soon. And then you see all of these anti-police crowds that are building up in Baltimore today. There's a sheriff in another town who has had enough, more than enough.
We've heard Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. Well, cops' lives matter too. So why don't we just drop the qualifier and just say lives matter?
The race for 2016, and there's only one place to stop.
Is that pressure getting to you? What you just told me isn't a lot different than what Hillary Clinton said on Keystone. I'll get back to you if I become president. Do you worry that you're not getting the attention?
No one asks the questions like Neil.
If one of your sons came out gay, would you feel the same way? You hear Black Lives Matter, Doctor. How do you answer that? Because other candidates have said all lives matter. You don't agree with that. Your criticisms have been at best tepid, and I wonder why.
12 to 2 p.m. Cavuto, Coast to Coast on the Fox Business Network. 4 p.m. Your World on the Fox News Channel. No one means business like Neil.